You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and I'm joined by Michael Borkey from Super Talk, the Rebel Report. He's basically all over your airwaves around Mississippi. Michael, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm excited for draft night. The Saints are picking best available tackle, whoever it is. They're getting an offensive tackle, so a very boring but necessary draft. But I love the draft. I love the NFL, and so I'm really excited about today. I do have a stick in the mud take, though. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
It's Ole Miss related.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of, like, what's your favorite draft moment? And then it'll be a picture of the Laramie Tunsil gas mask bong thing. And while I understand that was like a shocking thing, like an unbelievable thing that happened, but that should not be anybody's favorite draft moment, because what that was hurt feelings caused somebody to try to sabotage the greatest day of a young man's life. That's what that was. And so, and he was successful to some degree in that, because it cost Laramie initially millions of dollars. And for hours on national television in front of millions of people, his character was questioned. He was called bad guy, bad decision maker, locker room issue, all that stuff, because of an old video that, again, hurt feelings caused somebody to use an old video to try to sabotage him on that day. I don't think that's awesome, because if you know Laramie Tunsil, you know he is none of the things that were said about him that night after that video came out. But oh my gosh, a college athlete smoked marijuana. We can't have him in our locker room. I mean, give me a break. But so I see that, and I saw it all day yesterday, and I've seen it all day today. And Laramie Tunsil is a good, hardworking guy that deserved none of what happened to him that night. And of course, he's overcome it and got a massive contract, and he's one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL, and he's doing fine. But every time I see that, oh, this is my favorite moment from the draft, I think of that dude at the time. That young dude had his life turned upside down on what was supposed to be a celebration of how hard he worked through the duration of it. I hated that, and I hate seeing it today. So, yes, I'm a stick in the mud. I know it's funny, and he's got the mask and all that, but I don't find it funny at all in any way. And it's great to see him kind of, when you look back on that night, remind everybody of who he actually is, as opposed to what the people on the desk said he was because of a video that was taken when he was in college.
You know, the interesting thing is I follow a lot of people in the Detroit media, because I'm a Detroit Tigers fan, obviously. And one of the things that came out, because the draft is in Detroit tonight, is like the craziest draft day moment. And they showed that picture. And then the other one they showed was Eli Manning refusing to play for the Chargers. And I just replied back, and it's like, well, both worked out.
Yeah. I think both of them are pretty happy with their NFL careers, and especially Tunsil with the team that he's on and the situation that he's in. I mean, he's finally getting rewarded with a good team to follow his good play. But yeah, I love, aside from that, I am very much looking forward to the draft. I know there's Ole Miss baseball tonight that people will be watching as well, but I'll be locked in on the draft. And this time next year, I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot more draft content on this channel for you, considering what Ole Miss is going to be having this day next year. But for now, it's more of a tame weekend.
Where is the draft next year?
I don't know. Let me see.
Yeah. This would be fantastic pod, because I'm kind of, maybe the draft can be in Tampa Bay or Miami or someplace that I can drive to. That'd be nice.
Green Bay.
Oh, well, that's kind of the opposite of that. So
yeah. It'll be Green Bay in 2025, right next to Lambeau Field.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I don't know how I feel about the NFL draft doing the rotating venues for the draft. I kind of liked it when it was in Radio City Music Hall, and you always had obnoxious Jets fans and the whole 9 yards. That is kind of what the draft was for me. It is different when you do these outdoor events and you ship in fans from all the teams. I think some of the magic got lost in the name of creating an event.
Yeah, except for when they went to Nashville and the bachelorette party was ruined.
Yeah.
So the reporter that did that story was actually a good friend of mine in high school. And seeing her reporting go viral because of the angry bachelorette party, I mean, it was just so funny. I hadn't talked to her in years, and I reached out and I was like, do you realize how many people now know your name and are seeing your story? Like millions of people. You made it finally, all because a couple of boyfriends forgot to remind these girls that, hey, you're not going to have fun because the draft is there. Other than that, I'm with you. Yeah, it's just kind of, but your Detroit is on the up, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, just everything about Detroit, the national narrative about the city and all that is changing a lot. So good for them, at least.
Yeah, I went and actually saw them play the Rays on Monday night. Got to see Tarek Skubal pitch and
Nice.
like 100-mile-an-hour left-hand fastball. He's just, whenever you think you see a pitcher dominate, like that 95-mile-an-hour thrower that's in high school that the other team just can't hit, it is certainly surreal to see a major league pitcher do that to other major league players.
Oh, yeah, I imagine so. I haven't been to a major league park in a while. We got a Double-A team here, and this is their last season. They're moving, so I've got to take advantage while I can. But, man, the last major league game I've been to is like 15 years ago, probably, in Atlanta, which is now where Georgia State plays football. So,
yeah, that is pretty cool. As a South Carolinian, are you an Atlanta Braves fan?
I have no major league team, and I don't dislike the Braves, but I feel like if I were to jump, become a Braves fan now, everybody would look at me as just like a bandwagoner, because they're in the middle of an incredible run with great teams. When I adopted New Orleans as my teams, the football, the basketball teams both stunk. Now I know that the Saints had won a Super Bowl a few years prior, but I jumped on the bandwagon at the low point. And now I guess you could argue that the Saints are at an even lower point, and the Pelicans have never really not been at a low point. But if I did that with the Braves, I would be just a front runner, and I don't like that. I want to be on the ground floor with this stuff.
As somebody that adopted the Saints in the early 80s, let me assure you, you did not adopt the Saints at a low point.
Bags on your head and everything.
Oh, yeah. I remember when Kenny Stabler and Dave Wilson and those guys were playing. That was so rough. I didn't get to see Archie there. I'm a little bit after Archie, but the 80s, oh, man, until Jim Moore got there, it was a disaster. Anyway, let's change the subject a little bit and get it on Ole Miss sports as well. I have a question for you. How all in is Ole Miss football right now? Because we've all heard the Tyler Bear rumors. They've been going around for a couple of weeks, and you hear people talk about red flags or whatever, what went on in January. My thing is, I think people think that locker room chemistry is like a first frozen lake of the year that you don't want to walk on, that could break on anything. If a pebble falls on it, it could blow everything up. I don't think they understand what's going on. If you have a strong-willed, good head coach that people respect, locker room chemistry kind of goes from there. It's a trickle-down thing. But how all in is Ole Miss? Would they go after a Tyler Barron because he's probably the best defensive lineman that they have a chance to get in this transfer portal window? He is somebody that could absolutely help them out when you consider that Princely Amonmielen is going through some kind of a surgery thing, that there's questions about that going on as well. That could help out Ole Miss's team in pass rush. So how all in on this Ole Miss team would you take?
I would say they are all in responsibly. They are, for example, letting Quinshon Judkins walk. And despite what people not around Ole Miss want to tell you, Ole Miss could have kept Quinshon Judkins if they wanted to. If they really wanted to, they could have. They chose not to. They have been involved with other portal guys and have chosen to move on from them if their asking price became something that would be looked at as inefficient. Now, there's a difference between can't afford it and don't want to afford it. There are things that I can afford that I choose not to because I don't need to, right? It's the same thing for everybody. There's a point where it just doesn't become worth the cost. And Ole Miss is being responsible there. And, okay, I want this player, but if the asking price becomes this, then we're going to back out because we can find a better player or an equal player for a smaller amount of money and be more efficient with the money. So that They're all in, but responsibly. They're not overpaying to keep Judkins around because they felt like it got to a point where they needed to just send him on his way. They could have kept him if they wanted to. They could have kept Chris Marshall if they wanted to. They chose not to. There were issues, and they moved on. If they were recklessly all in, maybe a Michael Trigg is still around. Maybe a Chris Marshall is still around. Maybe a Judkins is still around. But they're doing it. They're going about it, I think, the right way. Tyler Barron's an interesting situation for sure. I'd be lying if I said I didn't also have I wonder how that breakup went. Could that become an issue? Thought. But the more I think about it, you said it, you're exactly right. Best available defensive lineman. You can never have enough defensive linemen, and I think Ole Miss still needs some help in pass rush anyway, and he can give you that. He's not Princely. I don't think he would start over Ivy, but he would play and play a lot and help this team. I've heard that the coaching staff liked him when they signed him a lot, and they like him still, even though he did the leaving Ole Miss and going to Louisville and possibly coming back to Ole Miss thing. But there's two things that I've kind of changed my mind on that. One, not every breakup is bad. There are times where players are pressured to go somewhere else, things that are maybe even slightly out of their control. Henry Parrish's breakup with Ole Miss went just fine. It was fine. That's why they welcomed him back, because there was no drama there. TJ McCants, I know it's baseball, but his breakup with Ole Miss, there's absolutely no drama there. Everybody within the program loves him, and all of the fans that I've seen are going to welcome him back with open arms, and they should, because he was an integral part of a championship team, and he's a really good young man. I don't know why Tyler Barron left for sure. I don't know why he's leaving Louisville, although based on what else is happening at Louisville kind of tells you that there might be a pretty good reason why. But
it feels like rubber checks.
It certainly does. They had another player hit the portal today. I mean, they are losing guys, and there's something up there. But best available defensive lineman, you deal with issues if there are some, and we don't know if there are. But two, if one guy, let's just pretend that he may be flaky or have potential locker room issues. If that one guy can ruin your locker room, you don't have a strong one. Jackson Dart, JJ Pegues, Jared Ivey, Trey Harris, those guys are not going to let somebody come in and disrupt what they've got. You saw it with Judkins. If you don't fall in line with what we want from you and what the standard of this team is, we don't care who you are. You're not on this team anymore. Quinshon Judkins is an elite level player, and everybody saw the video of the Peach Bowl. The team rejected him. Elite player, didn't matter. They rejected him. If Tyler Barron is an issue, again, there's no reason to believe that he is or isn't. I have no idea.
He wasn't at Tennessee.
If he's an issue, he won't last. And if he's not, you have somebody that can help you win games. I think you have to do it. If he wants to come to Ole Miss, I think you got to bring him in, regardless of what happened back in January. You're trying to win a championship. You're trying to win a championship. If he becomes disruptive, send him on his way. You've done it before, do it again. But you can win with a guy like that. You got to get a guy like that.
Well, I have a question. Wesley Walker was his teammate at Tennessee, ended up at Louisville. He's the guy that he really followed to Louisville, and Wesley Walker was not offered by Ole Miss. Is this a situation? Is Tyler Barron worth it? And it's not a calf and a cow type situation, because Wesley Walker was a starter on Tennessee's defense a year ago. He's obviously a pretty good player. But do you just say, okay, we can take this defensive back, we'll put those guys in the room, bring Barron in, and see how that works out?
I mean, if he's good enough, my question would be, why didn't they offer him the first time?
That is mine as well. That's the reason I'd almost look at this like a calf and a cow type situation, not necessarily a Kobe Arsenault, Joe McKnight type situation, but something similar to that. Maybe a Zedrick Wood to Laramie Tunsil type situation.
Yeah.
If it would help you get that defensive lineman, would it be beneficial to just put him in your secondary? Because you have players, the cream's going to rise to the top. And if nothing else, Wesley Walker can help you out in special teams. He started a year ago at Tennessee.
Yeah. I mean, he can play for sure. I mean, I I shouldn't say this in this business that I'm in, that you should just trust the coaches. I hate that line of because they're not all right all the time. But I think that that Golding and Kiffin, with how they've handled portal players, deserve the benefit of the doubt. I mean, they have earned the benefit of the doubt. So if they see that as something necessary, then I think fans should just nod their head and say, okay, let's ride, go try to win a championship.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. When we come back, we're going to talk about the running back situation at Ole Miss. And also, Chris Beard's doing a little portal kinging of his own, so stick around for that. But right now, I do want to let you know, we've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime, and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure if your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, it's time to get back into this game, pull off some bank heist, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. We're talking about the smash hit mobile game, Monopoly Go. It lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with a ton of new twists, including leaderboards, and compare the progress with your buddies on leaderboards. There's so much to do. You can play countless dynamic Monopoly boards. You can make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community tests and in-tournament rewards to get extra rewards and climb up that leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go. It's now free on the App Store or Google Play. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that screaming and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Be part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every single day. All right, Michael, we talked about Tyler Barron and what was going on in locker room chemistry and how all in Ole Miss football is this season. Let's move on to the running back position because that is kind of the story at the moment. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt from New Mexico committed a week ago Friday. Henry Parrish committed to Ole Miss. Trent Howland has visited the program, and now there's smoke and national rumors about Dylan Edwards being a target. Would Ole Miss take 4 running backs?
It certainly looks like it. I mean, maybe Lane Kiffin has moved his eye from taking as many quarterbacks as humanly possible to running backs, but absolutely needed to add in the running back room regardless. I mean, I know Judkins' departure was one that seemingly was necessary, but when I say elite level back, I mean it. I mean, he is an elite level football player that ran for almost 300 carries last year. And so while I don't think you need to replace Judkins with another Judkins because there's not that many out there, Ole Miss can be what everybody thinks that they can be with good at running back and not necessarily elite. So they had to add numbers because Diggs, the transfer from LSU, a lot of talk about him not being available at the beginning of the season, got hurt in the bowl game. That's certainly a question mark. And if you're Ole Miss, you have to look at that as possibly not available this season. You hope he is. I mean, he's a supreme athlete. Those guys heal differently than us. Maybe he's available, but you have to understand that he may not be. Aside from him, it's Bentley, who has had injuries. I don't think that he's a 300 carry guy. Has not shown the durability to be that. And then a guy coming off of a redshirt season. That's all you've got in your running back room. They need more numbers. And I do think that, they're going to have an offensive approach that mirrors 2021 to some degree.
I don't think don't mirror 20 or 11. No.
I don't think Jackson Dart's going to have 150 carries like Matt Corral, but they had 4 guys on that team that had 100 carries or more. And Paris was one of those guys, ironically. I think that you're going to see more of that from Ole Miss this year than last year, where one guy got, 275 carries in Judkins. I think you're going to see a better carry distribution, which would allow to keep multiple running backs happy. But if you bring in 4 portal running backs, it's a good problem to have, but you're not keeping them all happy with Bentley and you said it earlier, Ricino. Ricino. I've been saying it wrong. Ricino. And Diggs already there. You bring in 3 more on top of those guys, somebody's not going to be happy. And, it's put your big boy pants on and deal with it. But that's a lot of guys in a room that also is involved in an offense that has Trey Harris, Jordan Watkins, Juice Wells, Caden Priestcourt. I mean, there's only one football. Good problem to have, but that is interesting that they're going to stockpile possibly at running back when there's not that many carries to go around.
Yeah, I'm sure. Have you seen the movie Moneyball?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those situations. And I did a whole show on this because I believe that Ole Miss is replacing Quinshon Judkins in the aggregate. They are finding 3 different running backs to match 300 carries, 1,200 yards, and 15 touchdowns. That's what they want. They don't care how they do it. The situation where they're recruiting somebody like Trent Howland, I do think a big back is going to get recruited to replace that part of Quinshon's game. I think, and they entirely broke down what Quinshon was as a running back and figured out how they could replace that.
Yeah, the bruiser aspect of this is really interesting to me because, if they were to just add Edwards, right, they're still lacking that big physical bruiser back. And there's a real chance, I think, that we're looking at this Ole Miss offense in a lot of games differently than what we're used to. Because everybody sees Lane Kiffin's offenses as explosive, and for good reason, because they are. They run the football a lot, but even their running game is explosive. It's fast. They don't sub a lot because it's, if you have a successful first down, it's get to the line and get another one, and that's how they move. They're going to be playing games this year like Kentucky, for example. Let's pretend Ole Miss gets a 14-point lead just midway through the third quarter against Kentucky. They've built this roster and are apparently building the running back room to where they can take that 14-point lead and make that second half shrink. I mean, just shrink because of what they've added on the offensive line. They now have 2 proven Power 5 tight ends, one that's an all-SEC guy in Priestcourt, a quarterback that can run the football a little bit, not a little bit, effectively, very well, but you don't want him to run that much. Regardless, I'm getting off in the weeds. I think there's a chance that with the way they've built this team, that Ole Miss is going to suffocate teams running the football slowly, like Ohio State, 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of stuff, where they just line up, take 25 seconds off the play clock, run for 4.5, take 25 seconds off the play clock, run for 4.5, and just suffocate you that way. I think that's going to come for this team this year. It saves you a lot. I mean, Lane Kiffin has talked about how he needs to prepare his team for a long run. He's expecting a playoff run. And so when you're playing a Kentucky and you've got a lead, that takes snaps away and that takes hits away. And that's a good thing that keeps you healthy. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if you see some of that from Ole Miss this year. And maybe that's what they're looking at here with this running back room is, I'm going to get leads in the first half and I'm going to milk them in the second half by just pounding the rock. And so I need a bunch of dudes that can do that.
Yeah, the real crazy thing, I did a show actually this week that said everybody needs to be prepared that schematically this offense might slow down and things might change because it can.
Mm-hmm. They're really good at tight end, and they're possibly going to be really good up front. It's all on paper, but what they've done on the offensive line, nobody's talking about Jerquan Scott. we'll be talking about him into October, I think. They've done it on paper on the offensive line. I'm not saying they're Georgia because they're not, but I think that they can have a style like Georgia where they can take the top off when they need to, and then they can line up and run it down your throat when they need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a real situation. And honestly, if anybody that's an Ole Miss fan is watching this, Ole Miss fans have not felt that before. This is a new feeling for them because even in years when Ole Miss was supposed to perform, let's take 2009. They got a lot of preseason hype going into 2009. There were still a lot of things that needed to go well for them to do what needed to be done. Mm-hmm. Now that necessarily isn't the case. If Ole Miss does what it's supposed to do, it should be what we all expect them to be, not like them overachieving some kind of expectation.
Absolutely. And, it'll be a long offseason talking point, but it's an accurate one. I think Lane Kiffin has a ton of pressure on him now because where is the out? Where's the excuse? Mm-hmm. Knock on wood, injuries would be the only one. But otherwise, if they stay a relatively healthy football team, Lane Kiffin has no excuses. I'm talking nationally. I know Ole Miss fans love him, and they should, and he's done great things with Ole Miss. Ole Miss fans know what he's capable of and are very aware of how great of a coach he is. But nationally, there's still that, can Lane take a program there question? And now there's no excuse. Last year, he had them. They weren't good enough on the lines of scrimmage. Simply weren't. And that got them beat in Athens, and that got them beat in Tuscaloosa. On paper, they're good enough on the lines of scrimmage now. Now there's a 12-team playoff. You have more access. It's not lose one game and you're out. The schedule sets up really well. 4 of your 5 road games are teams that had losing records last year. I mean, you have to go to Baton Rouge. That stinks. You have to play Georgia. That stinks worse, but they're at home. You get Oklahoma at home. Arkansas is a disaster. South Carolina might be a disaster. Florida might be a disaster. So those are typically really difficult places to play, not difficult teams in 2024. The only thing that is stopping Ole Miss from achieving its goals this year is themselves. And how many times have you been able to say that in your life? Not many, but that's what it is now.
Yeah, and I was sitting here talking, I think yesterday on my show, that I just say it again, and I've been saying about every 3 months, it's like, listen, this season, I'm going to handle this differently. This is not going to be talked about like it's 2008. You have a situation of a coach that is making $9 million a year. You have players receiving money. Now, I'm not the person to attack a player because I'm just a positive person and that's not my personality. But the point is, there's no excuse for media or anybody else to not tell things exactly as they are, because everything's on path to be what you want if it gets done. But if something goes wrong, people need to understand why things are going wrong.
Yeah, 100%. So, but here they are, Steven. Now baseball season's not over yet, so it can't be just like all in on football. But here it is. This is what people like us have been talking about for so long, because we've known that Ole Miss has been capable of being this. They don't have the resources of LSU or Georgia, but with some efficiency, this was always possible there. Here they are. And so go take it, because the opportunity is right in front of them. And I mean, personally, I think that they're going to get there. My prediction still is 10-2. But I think that 10-2 will be a playoff berth. And when you get to the playoffs, all bets are off. And I mean, the fact that I'm sitting here and people are going to be like, that seems a little low at Ole Miss winning 10 games as a preseason prediction tells you that here they are. They have arrived in that space, and it's up to them to go take it. I think they will, but we have to see.
I'm going to put you on the spot right here, okay? Ole Miss hosts a playoff game in December. Let's say they're hosting Ohio State in Oxford. Jackson Dart, the greatest quarterback ever in Ole Miss history.
Do they win the game?
No, I'm going into the game. My thing is the baseline of just making that home playoff game, because that is 30 wins for Jackson Dart, which would be the most ever in Ole Miss history.
Yes. Answer is yes.
Yeah.
Answer,
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, if there's there is a home playoff game, we're in statue territory at that point.
Yeah, and especially because it's not fair to like Eli because college football didn't exist like this back then.
Mm-hmm.
But what Jackson Dart has done for this roster is a story that has been told, but I think it needs to be emphasized even more. If this team is successful, Lane Kiffin deserves credit. All of the recruiting staff deserve credit, but Jackson Dart sat for hours on Xbox Live recruiting defensive players. I mean, he was heavily involved in the construction of this roster and recruiting these guys. He's not just playing quarterback for this team. He was lead recruiter. He is responsible for the personnel on this team to a degree. He's not exclusively responsible. Coaches had to recruit too. Fans had to raise money for collective, but this team exists the way it does because Jackson Dart is the quarterback. If it was any other regular dude playing quarterback, there's a bunch of defensive players that are not playing for Ole Miss today. Princely being one of them. His interview during spring practice, his media op, he told you straight up, I'm here because of Jackson. I'm a defensive player. I'm here because the quarterback is why I'm here. And so that should add to his lure of not only was he a great quarterback at Ole Miss and won all these games, but he was also the guy that kind of brought that roster together, which, again, not fair to the likes of Eli because it didn't work that way back then, but it matters here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you have a situation. I never thought like a year 5 Lane Kiffin to where there would actually be competition for the face of the program. And that tells you what Jackson Dart has been able to accomplish.
Absolutely. And, you know, especially with his story too, right? Because, you know, he got a raw deal at USC. His coach gets fired. He's hurt, by the way. So when he's getting his starts at USC, he's hurt. He had like a torn meniscus, I think. So he had to get surgery. Caleb Williams comes in. He doesn't want to leave USC. He liked USC. He had teammates and stuff that he loved there, but he wasn't going to play over Caleb Williams. So he had to transfer to the state that he's never been in. And he has to deal with a quarterback competition, and he wins that competition. And then the next year, a 43-game starter comes in. I mean, he has overcome a lot more adversity than people realize, and playing through injury. Jackson Dart wasn't hurt last year. He was injured, and he played through it because that's what he does. He's a tough kid, has an interesting journey to get to Ole Miss, and has adapted into this new – it's not just a new school. It's a new culture. Oxford's different than LA. Mississippi's different than Utah. And not only did he adapt to it, he thrived in it. He's special. And I know that fans understand that, but I hope that the ones that don't do, because he's dealt with a lot and he's overcome a lot and loves the place that he's at while doing all of it. It's not transactional. He loves where he is, clearly. Has been given opportunities to go elsewhere and didn't even entertain it because he loves where he's at and he's thriving in it.
It's 2045. Is Jackson Dart the head coach at Ole Miss?
24. So that's 20 years from now. He'd be just wrapping up his career as Derek Carr's replacement for the Saints and winning 4 Super Bowls there. He might just go into broadcasting instead of coaching after having such a successful NFL career. He's replacing Drew Brees at the top of the Saints Mount Rushmore. And I'd love him to be a Saint is what I'm saying. But I could see that. I could see him getting into coaching, especially considering what he's done with this roster.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah, I think he'd be hyper successful, and not only having a 3-year, mentorship under Lane Kiffin and learning how to run a program and what he's done as far as innovating. I think he has a real chance to be good. Anyway, let's talk about Sean Padula. He just got picked up and signed by, or committed, I should say, by Ole Miss. This is a player that averaged 16.4 points a game, 4.3 rebounds, 4.6 assists. He's a good good basketball player, but also he's a huge position of need at a point guard for Chris Beard and the Ole Miss Rebels.
Yeah, they didn't have one last year. Juju Murray did well in a new role for the most part. Now, there are some limitations in his game that just make it difficult in the SEC, but point guard is not what he was when he came into Ole Miss, and he did, he did as well as he could. This is different. This is somebody that can score at a high volume. The only question is there are times where he turns it over a little bit too much, but when you're handling the basketball as much as he does, that's going to happen sometimes. A volume scorer, but shoots at a good percentage. This is a really, really quality pickup. And so when you pair him in Davis and Barnes with your guards that you brought in the portal, there is very clearly on paper an upgrade in scoring ability, really from all the portal guys. The bigs that they've picked up as well, the two bigs are 35+% three-point shooters and have a face-up game. So on paper, this basketball team should not have the issues scoring the ball the way that they did a year ago. And here's just another example of that, a guy that can fill up a stat sheet and make a high volume of outside shots. And it's what they were missing last year is the depth of scorers. They didn't have any scorers. If Matt Morrell was off and Murray wasn't making shots, where did the points come from? They didn't. And now they are rectifying that issue in a big way. And here's just another example of that.
You think they're done?
No. There's a few more spots to fill on the roster. Now, they may be done in terms of high-level players like this. Every portal pickup's been a 4-star portal guy. So they need numbers. I guess there's a line of thinking that maybe Matt Morrell comes back. I've heard that, and I just don't know how real that possibility is. That doesn't seem right to me.
If Matt Morrell comes back, this is all of a sudden a second weekend team.
Ooh, buddy. Yeah. But yeah, they're not done yet. But I do think that it might be a hard sell right now because you've filled the roster with a bunch of dudes that expect to start and play heavy minutes and get their shots. So.
Yeah, should be really interesting. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Michael Borkey from Super Talk FM, the Rebel Report. What do you have going on at Super Talk this week?
Draft. We're doing a lot of draft and then baseball as well. Our audience loves baseball. So we've got Ole Miss, Alabama starting tonight. Is this publishing today?
No, it'll go up Sunday. It'll be behind a paywall.
Oh, wow. Okay,
so
so we will be talking a lot about the series that you guys have already watched, and State has improved their postseason standing a good bit over the last week or so, and so that'll be it. A lot of baseball and a lot of draft this week into next.
All right, thank you, Michael, for coming by. We got to do it again, bud.
Anytime.